So here we've got some information. We need to determine the equation of the function. So we know the axis of symmetry is that x equals 3. We know it passes through 2 points. This is the hardest, one of the hardest questions that there is in this unit. Are you ready? No, it is a hard one. This is a very hard one. What do we know about our graph here? We know that our axis of symmetry is right here at x equals 3. We know that it passes through the points -1, 6. Oops, -1, -6. 3, 4, 5, 6. -1, -6. And 5, 0. Do you remember studying systems of equations last year? Where you have, if you have 2 equations with 2 things you don't know, then you can find out what those 2 things are. If you have 3 equations with 3 things that you don't know, then you can find out all 3 of those things. This has that built in to that into the question. So what you learned last year with systems of equations comes back in this. Y equals x minus p squared plus q. In order to find the equation, I need to find a value for a, for p, and for q. Do I know any of those values from what I have right now? I know that x, yes, I know I can plug in some points, but as far as a, p, and q, do I know any of them already? So in order to know p, to know something about the vertex, right? The vertex is here and going down. For sure that it's on our axis of symmetry. What does that tell me? One of it has to be 3. So given the axis of symmetry, we are equal to 3. So now we say, closer, I know that it's going to be x minus 3 all squared plus q. But I don't know if it's going up or if it's going down or where that other point is going to be yet. Okay? What we learned in the last question is that if you know a point, you can plug that in. So if I take my point -6, -1, I can plug that in, -6 for y, and simplifying this, 1 minus 3 is -4. -4 squared would be 16. I'm going to call this equation 1. Because when doing a system of equations, there's 2 things I don't know in this. I don't know A and I don't know Q. In order to figure them out, I need to have another equation. but I can get another equation because I have another point. So to find a second equation, I plug in my second point. So we know that when y is 0, x is 5. Simplifying this, 5 minus 3 is 2, 2 squared is 4. I'm going to call this equation 2. So now it's going back to solving systems of equations that you did before. Do you remember the substitution technique? Does that ring a bell? Elimination technique? Some say yes, some say no. I'll teach it to you. I'll teach you the substitution technique. It's relatively simple and easy to use. The substitution technique says get a variable by itself. For this, looking at equation 1 and equation 2, what variable would be really easy to have all by itself in an equation? If you move the 4a over, can you see the q would be all by itself? Okay? So we could move the 4a over and you get negative 4a is equal to q. Again, it's important to know which equation you're working with. So that was equation 2. So now I'm going to go to equation 1, but instead of writing q, my equation 1 is negative 6 equals 16a plus, but instead q is equal to minus 4a. What the substitution technique does is it changes your equations with having two variables, which you can't solve. Now, by substituting in, what's the only variable in equation 1? An a. And now I can solve for a, because 16a minus 4a would be 12a. Dividing both sides by 12 gives me negative 6 over 12, which reduces to negative 1/2. So substitution method, you get a variable by itself. We'll call that step 1. You substitute into the other equation, step 2, sorry. Step 3 is we solved. So I found out a was negative 1/2. My equation 2 said negative 4a was equal to q. Right? That was my equation 2. What can I plug in for a now? Negative 1/2 for a. 4 times negative 1/2 will give us positive 2. So now we figured out q is equal to 2. Each of the things that we needed to solve for, notice I've circled them to keep things there's the entire work so far, because we needed that right at the beginning. each of the values that we needed to solve for, A, P, and Q, we've now solved for them. So now we can write our final equation, y equal to. A value is -1/2. X minus 3, because P was 3, and Q is 2. There's another method you could solve it by as well. Yes, there's more than one method, but this is solving systems of equations. This is question 9 that you can do to practice. We won't do example 4. We'll leave that the last 5 minutes if you would like to go down and vote.